They are coming for our children and our guns. At one point in the not too distant past, this was dismissed by the left as alarmism and part of a slippery slope fallacy. But as recent events show, nothing could be further from the truth. California has just passed a law allowing the state to take children from parents who don't support their children transitioning and engaging in irreversible hormone treatments and surgery. Washington has proposed the same law. States across the nation pass increasingly onerous and unconstitutional restrictions on gun rights, and now Governor Grisham of New Mexico issued an executive order banning the open and concealed carry of firearms. This, by every definition, strips people of the Second Amendment. In her own words, no right is absolute. She went on to say that both her oath and the Constitution are not absolute. The quiet part, yet again, has been said out loud. As I write this video, I have evidence to suggest many militia and PMC organizations are heading towards New Mexico for a giant protest. Several things could happen because of this. The first is what we have seen time and again, and is what has caused many people to become doomers. We protest, and it is peaceful because it is full of conservatives and libertarians, and the left safely ignores us. And that is the problem. When the left protests, they are loud and destructive, and then are protected by leftist politicians. When the right protests, it is generally more docile, non-destructive, and law-abiding. Typically, if the right or libertarians protest, the most laws they break are normally broken by protests, like wandering outside of approved zones, littering, noise ordinances, and other small, inconsequential civic mandates. If the free people protested in the way the leftist organizations and followers protested, they would be rounded up in mass and arrested. They would be charged to the fullest extent of the law, and enforcement would throw the book at everyone they catch. Look what happened during January 6th. They took people who essentially went on an unimproved guided tour of the Capitol and successfully painted it as a violent insurrection that was attempting to overthrow the government. The takeaway here is that we live not just under a two-tier justice system, but a two-tier political system. In a just system, political action, both violent and nonviolent, both legal and illegal, should be treated the same regardless of political affiliation, cause, or advocacy. What we have is a system where if you agree with a certain group, you have a free pass to commit violent acts, where if you agree with another group, you will be held accountable to both real and fictional crimes. If you don't break the law, they will find a way to claim you did. If you did break the law, they will find a way to accuse you of a more substantial crime. They ensure that the punishment doesn't match the crime because you had the audacity to be on the other side and engage in rowdy political action. Political action they would praise if they agreed with it. In fact, we have reached such clown world proportions that they didn't just let the BLM rioters off the hook. They are now handing out giant checks to people they arrested for pushing further than even the liberal cities could tolerate. They are wringing their hands and apologizing for enforcing the smallest portion of the laws the rioters violated and paying them with your tax dollars. This is unfortunately the most likely outcome. I believe it is the constitutional obligation of the county sheriff to arrest Governor Grisham, but find it unlikely he will have the political or moral will to take action. If he doesn't, and protesters reach the city, they will probably be loud and peaceful. If they come armed or cause a ruckus, some will be arrested and prosecuted to prove a point. In the end, the left will be emboldened because while there was protests, they got away with violating the Constitution. This unfortunately sets a horrible precedent and will make it much more likely that other politicians will violate the Second Amendment or other parts of the Constitution in their own way. A judge saying it was unconstitutional after the fact does nothing because they got away with it at the time, and if there are no consequences, they can functionally repeat their actions with no fear. And that is the key element of law, fear. The Constitution is the chief law of the land and is designed to keep the government and politicians in check. If we the people fear the laws the government and politicians create, but the government and politicians do not fear the only law keeping them in check, we have complete tyranny. And that is the difference between government that is constrained and one that isn't. In almost every nation throughout history, there have never been laws for the lawgivers. The only thing the rulers feared was pushing the people so far that they make their lives so horrible and intolerable that they rose up and killed their rulers. The Constitution is supposed to be rules for rulers, something to keep the politicians in check so the government does not become so intolerable and trample our rights as to trigger that beautiful alter or abolish clause from the Declaration of Independence. This could be the critical test to see if the Constitution has any bite left in it. If Governor Grisham is held accountable, then there might be a sliver of hope left for our country, and perhaps through constant political action and training the next generations properly, we can move back towards freedom. But that is unlikely, and I think the most likely outcome is an underwhelming nothing. I think there will be outrage, some lawsuits that fizzle, and maybe an after-the-fact decision from the judge that ends up meaningless and toothless. With the FUD out of the way, there are some more interesting outcomes that could rise from this situation. The first is the people descending on New Mexico completely refuse to disarm as they enter the zone of control. This will force local law enforcement to make a choice: enforce the governor's mandate or allow open carry of weapons and side with the Constitution. The mayor of Albuquerque has said that it isn't the job of the local police to enforce the governor's edict, so it will be interesting to see if other agencies try to step up. It is possible that out of fear or an overreaction, the governor could attempt to use the National Guard to enforce her edicts. This would either require declaring martial law or more likely rely on a declaration of emergency like they did during the pandemic. If the National Guard are called up, we could see things spiral out of control. I think the worst possible outcome would be for the National Guard to be sent against armed and angry Second Amendment protesters. There is a point past which people will no longer peacefully submit to arrest, and it is likely that the people traveling to New Mexico are past that. Here is where predicting what would happen becomes impossible. It is unlikely the federal government would tolerate armed resistance to law enforcement, but things become legally confusing when that armed resistance is to an illegal executive order. It is entirely possible that this potential conflict could lead to a similar standoff or civil war like I discussed in my previous video, 2 Paths to Civil War. An interesting outcome would be if the government did activate the National Guard. They did move in, but when ordered to arrest the protesters, the National Guard simply refuses and remains in place, maintaining peace but not engaging in further constitutional violations by arresting or attacking the people that are protesting the constitutional violation. This would have the most nuanced and hard to predict outcome of all. This would cause a storm of accusations, warrants, lawsuits, and general chaos within the National Guard, local government, law enforcement, and beyond. One of the many things I'm concerned about in this situation is after-event prosecutions. Most people who participated in January 6th were not arrested at the time. Rather, they let the guided tour happen and then manufactured the charges after the fact, arresting people even just this week, years after the event. The goal of delayed arrests like this is to have a chilling effect on the First Amendment and political protests. They want an aura of fear to hover over anyone considering protesting or attending a conservative or libertarian event. I am willing to bet that most of the people at January 6th thought they had been let in and what they were doing was legal. It sure looked that way from the footage. Now everyone who attends an event that isn't far left has to wonder if they are being misled, if the people saying what they're doing is legal are actually federal agents or plants, and if they will find a way to redefine some law to make their actions illegal after the fact. This sort of chilling effect on free speech and activism is the heart and soul of constitutional violation lawsuits. One of the critical factors considered when police are prosecuted for violating free speech is whether their actions would be reasonably considered to have a chilling effect on a person's willingness to engage in free speech in the future. If they established an expectation of fear that engaging in political speech will lead to further retaliation. This is most certainly what has been established by the ongoing double standard. So what does this have to do with guns and children? Well, it is my firm belief that there is no coincidence that gun restrictions and laws allowing the government to take children from parents who aren't woke enough are being enacted at the same time. In Washington, they proposed a law virtually identical to the California transition law within a week of the AR ban going into effect, almost as if they wanted to get that applied first so people were less likely to resist when they come for their children. Nothing exists in a vacuum, and they are trying to create an ecosystem of oppression. They want us to fear speaking out or resisting. If you don't do what they want, they will have a laundry list of things they can go after to restrict your rights and cause you to fear for your job, children, safety, and survival. Their hand is squeezing tighter now that it is on our throats. When members of the transgender community are caught on video chanting, "We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children," we were told we were being alarmist, and it was allegorical. Allegorical to what? This is a direct statement that they are literally carrying out in multiple states through law. They have been doing that for decades through the schools. They're taking it global, with several German kindergartens opening rooms for something I can't mention on YouTube. And the worst part is they want us to resist violently and haphazardly because that allows them to arrest people, crack down, and make examples out of the people they catch. They want to make examples out of people. They want to point at the right and libertarians and be able to scream about how violent they are, as if their oppression, tyranny, and abuse of children was irrelevant, and the reaction existed in a void. They want excuses to go after our guns. They want you to think what do you think will happen if some of the protesters who go to New Mexico get in a firefight with police when they go to arrest them? How do you think that will be painted in the media or state and federal Senate chambers? Do you think the headline will be, "Brave patriots defend their Second Amendment rights against a rogue governor"? No, they will be called literal terrorists, and they will demand gun confiscation. Of course, that path leads to the second scenario in last week's video, and that leads nowhere good either. Here is the worst part. I can't, in good conscience, tell people they shouldn't protest. I can't tell people to fight this in court because the courts do not defend the people, the Constitution, or our rights. I can't tell people to go there armed because not only will that give the left what they want, but it will also bring law enforcement down on me. We are entering a very dangerous time where any action taken or not taken has massive downsides. So the only advice I can give is to be prepared, be smart, and have a strong network. Now, it is possible that nobody could show up, or just a few people could show up and protest, but that just leaves us with a less ideal version of the first scenario, where not only do they get away with their constitutional violations, but the protest is lame. This video is only accurate as of recording on September 9th at noon. I will be keeping a close eye on this situation and will try to provide updates on Twitter and additional videos as the situation develops. Please subscribe to me here, share this video, and follow me on Twitter. Stay free, my friends. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.